Hello and welcome to the study room. Sorry for the late release. This recording session kept getting interrupted for one reason or another. But I've blacked out my windows, barricaded the door, and thrown my phone off the pier, and now I'm ready to give it another go. This week's post is Dragon Race, or Lord of the Wings. Nothing says summer quite like an island getaway, does it? Think about it. When you're on an island, there's a beach in every direction. You could spin around blindfolded, stop, and walk a straight line, and you'd eventually hit the ocean. Take off the blindfold before you start walking, though. It would be hazardous otherwise. Picture it. The wind in your hair, the sand in your boots, and your dragon saddle freshly conditioned beneath you. Last week, we had one last day of school for the grown-ups. This week, I present to you a show that you might have missed that will keep both you and your kids entertained this summer. It's even a property you're likely to recognize. Let's get into How to Train Your Dragon spin-off series, DreamWorks Dragons Race to the Edge. You know how to train your dragon already, I'm sure. I remember seeing it for the first time in undergrad and going back to theaters to see it again. I hadn't seen an animated film that was so imaginative and gorgeous up until that point. It demanded repeat viewings. In case you need a crash course, there are Vikings who mostly sound Scottish as adults and American when younger, and there are dragons. And they were enemies for a very long time. Cue young Hiccup, a slight boy who never really fit in and couldn't bring himself to kill a dragon, inadvertently befriending one, a night fury called Toothless, and then changing the relationship between Vikings and dragons forever. Lovely set of movies, really worth watching if you haven't already. I don't normally tell you to watch something you've already seen, so why race to the edge? Well, it's a Netflix spin-off series based on the beloved film series, that's based on the beloved novel series, by Cressida Cowell, and it takes place between the first and second movies. So you still get all your favorite characters and their dragons while enriching the world of the series. What this does is give the series incredible and noticeable connection and continuity with the film series, which isn't always easy to pull off. The Penguins of Madagascar series was almost entirely unrelated to the Madagascar movies, although I did find it more entertaining than the movies, the penguins being the best part, but strangely, the Penguins movie was just okay. The Last Wish is an incredible movie, but Netflix's The Adventures of Puss in Boots series was borderline unwatchable. 6 seasons, though. Camp Cretaceous and Chaos Theory were pretty damn good cartoons in their own right, with lots of redeeming qualities and surprisingly much more cohesive storytelling than the Jurassic World movies on which they're based. But, rightfully so, they felt nothing like the movies. There are new villains and a slew of new dragons, sure. However, Race to the Edge doesn't feel like a spin-off. It doesn't feel like it's inspired by the movies. It feels like more of the movies. And for me, since I love the movies, it's a really welcomed addition. The animation quality isn't as good as the films, of course, but it does improve as the seasons progress, and it's never really an issue, whereas some of these animated spin-off shows can have animation quality and frame rates that make my eyes feel like they can't focus. So while it won't look as crisp as the films, it still feels like them. A lot of that has to do with the returning and replacement cast. Jay Baruchel from Tropic Thunder and Man-Seeking Woman returns as Hiccup, of course, so does America Ferrara from Barbie and Superstore, reprising her role as Astrid. As does Christopher Mintz-Plasse from Fright Night and Role Models as Fishlegs. That's really exciting to hear that core cast of characters in their movie-accurate voices. As for the rest of the Dragon Riders, it's a little more mixed. T.J. Miller also returns as Tough Nut, but I'd have been happier had he been replaced. You can click the link on the blog post for more information about that. Subbing in for Kristen Wiig as Andre Vermeulen from Angie Tribeca as Rough Nut, Zach Perlman from The Intern for Jonah Hill as Snotloud, Nolan North, most famous as Nathan Drake in the Uncharted game series for Gerard Butler, as Stoic, and journeyman VA Chris Edgerly as Gobber instead of Craig Ferguson. And they all do excellent jobs standing in, to the point that it took me some time to parse out who was new. With enough of the film actors doing voices here, any slight differences are hard to get bothered about. The show also adds the voice acting talents of Mae Whitman from Arrested Development and Good Girls, David Faustino from Married with Children and The Legend of Korra, and even Alfred Molina from Spider-Man 2 and Show Me a Hero, and others through the series. It's not like you'll be dazzled by the big names, but when I heard Alfred Molina's voice for the first time, it was a real treat. Suffice it to say, the voice acting across the series is top notch. But more important than all that is how well the show is written. I really shouldn't be surprised considering the strength of the films, but I don't really have the best relationship with DreamWorks properties. Don't get me wrong, it's not like they're Illumination. The writing is surprisingly mature while still being fully kid-friendly. But because it tackles actual stuff, it's still an engaging series for adults. Sure, some of the humor might appeal more to younger brains, but there's still compelling story here for the characters. Unlike shows aimed at very young audiences, like the underrated and good for kids Young Jedi Adventures, Race to the Edge doesn't just aim to teach kids about kindness, empathy, and acceptance, but also tackle the hardships that kids will face as they grow up through adolescence. Hiccup isn't perfect. He doesn't always win. He doesn't always make the right decisions. He's not always perfectly even-keeled. He loses. He loses his temper. He has flaws. Of course, when confronted with them, he admits his mistakes and makes changes to his behavior. In short, he learns lessons when he's wrong, which is something that not only kids could learn from, but just about every adult I know could benefit from learning to admit they're wrong and taking steps to rectify them as well. Hiccup deals with failures, and when he's out of his depth, he's not afraid to seek help and take the advice given to him. I didn't realize I was coming to this conclusion when I started writing, but Hiccup is an amazing role model and represents a kind of masculinity that isn't toxic. The world could really use more Hiccups. And the rest of the crew is similarly realized, at least in line with the size of the role. Astrid is the biggest character after Hiccup, and she has some pretty good character arcs centered on her, and she has to learn and change as well. But not everyone gets the same exact treatment. It's proportional. Ruffnut doesn't get the same character growth as Astrid, but she does get character growth. For a kid's show sandwiched between the confines of two movies, it does an impressive job in the writing department. If Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. were written half as well as this, I wouldn't still be ragging on it years after it went off air. Hiccup and Co. face real hardships and difficulties, and they get put in real peril and have to make hard decisions. Don't worry, it's still a kid's show. It's not like Hiccup has to decide whether to cure the genophage or not. And ultimately, as they do in kids' shows, and much less often in real life, the good guys do win out. But along the way, the riders face antagonists of completely different styles and approaches, and challenges that they have to contend with. It's not just them finding one small would-be despot after another. There's real care and variation to whom Hiccup has to go head-to-head with, and each one provides new lessons for them, and any viewer, child or adult, to learn. That's one of the things that really impressed me, how the main antagonists change over the course of the series. A lot of times villains in series are much of a muchness. The character design changes, the voice changes, but the behavior largely stays the same. Look at how many big, bad, small-time megalomaniacs the crew from The Walking Dead face. But here, each antagonist brings differing aims and personalities, and sometimes some big names. Perhaps the most memorable villain is Alfred Molina's Vigo Grimborn, the head of a group of vicious for-profit dragon hunters. He's an experienced tactician, the consummate chess player, and he's properly menacing at times. Vigo's a better, more fully fleshed out villain than most in the MCU. And this is a kids' show by DreamWorks. The same people who made it so I can break out in the first few lines of Smash Mouth at any given time, fully against my will. But this show is great. I mean, look at, it's not Severance, but compared to most kids' media out there today, this has to go up there in the vaunted bluey tier of great shows that are appealing for both kids and adults. It's really that good. And it doesn't forego the fun for the lessons. There's plenty of silly humor and exciting dragon action to keep things light. It's been a real pleasure jumping back into this show to write this post because, well, I like it. I remain a big fan of the movies. I have the Lego Toothless sitting on my shelf, and, well, it's good stuff. On every level, Race to the Edge is the well-balanced meal you're going to want to eat. There can be some spooky moments. In one episode, Astrid comes upon a ship full of the dead and dying. It doesn't get too explicit, but it's obvious what's happening. There are a number of off-screen deaths. It's not as if they're mowing down people left and right, but occasionally there is death, and it's impactful to the story. There's plenty talk of death as well, so maybe kids unfamiliar with the concept are a tad bit too young. Streaming exclusively on Netflix, it's rated TV Y7, so, do with that information what you will. It ran for 6 seasons, 13 episodes each, so there are plenty of hours of entertainment for the whole family when the kids are done playing outside. Do kids still play outside? Or do they go to like virtual top golf versions of the outside? Top lawn? I don't know what kids do. When I was a kid, I always made excuses to stay inside where it wasn't 90 degrees plus Fahrenheit, and I would have loved to watch a show like this one. Blue skies and coastlines, there are worse ways to spend a summer, especially from your air-conditioned living room. Oh yeah, dragons too. What more could you want? And that's this week's post. Remember the old saying, dying is easy, comedy is hard. Writing a blog is somewhere in between. If you liked what you heard, there's a little button you can use to tell me. I'd really appreciate that. And if you'd like to subscribe so you get notified when the next one comes out, well, I can keep that between you and me. No one has to know. But if you want them to know, tell your friends. And if you didn't like it, tell your enemies and make them listen to me prattle on. Misery loves company, right? See you next week.